Well, hello and welcome to Newscenter. I'm Ashmit Kumar. Now, the Bar Council of India has weighed in on the issue of same-sex marriages. In a resolution, it has urged the Supreme Court to leave the issue squarely in the domain of the Parliament, adding that the legislatures represent the true will of the people. The comments from the Bar Council comes at a time when the Supreme Court is in the midst of hearing pleas seeking legal sanctity for same-sex marriages. Now, the Bar Council said that the marriage has been typically accepted and categorized as a union of a biological man and a biological woman for the twin purposes of procreation and recreation. It added that it would be catastrophic to overhaul something so fundamental through a judicial process. Moreover, the Bar Council, its resolution states that over 99.9% of the people of the country are opposed to the idea of same-sex marriages in a country. Joining me now to take this discussion forward is Sharif Ragnikar, author of Queer Sapien, and Vikram Hegde, Supreme Court advocate. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Ragnikar, let me come to you first. Quick thoughts. The Bar Council of India represents the collective wisdom of the bar, yet it comes out with a statement and making unsubstantiated claims to the effect that 99.9% of the population is opposed to the idea of same-sex marriages. Your quick thoughts.
Well, Ashmit, I think I think the Bar Council should be really embarrassed by what they've stated, because I don't know how they've come to such a percentage. There is nothing for them to back that. And also the other part that they're talking about, this being something for the Parliament to look at, the legislature to look at, because of that being the will of the people. But I think the Bar Council, as you use the word collective wisdom, I wish they have the collective wisdom to know how Parliament functions and how Parliament often actually denies people rights and often also fails to really live up to why and the reasons why they've been elected in those positions. So I don't have faith in the Parliament, and I think that's the case with most of us from the queer community, and that is the reason why we've moved to the courts. So their collective wisdom, I think, is incredibly misplaced, and they should be embarrassed by what they've actually said in terms of the way they've also approached the Supreme Court, knowing full well what the role of a constitutional bench is, or of any bench of the Supreme Court, when it comes to fundamental rights. So I think they're just trying to perhaps come under some sort of pressure to make such a statement, because I wouldn't imagine the Bar Council has this sort of wisdom.
Mr. Hegde, same question to you. The Bar Council seems to have chosen its words very carefully and has come out with a very strongly worded message as far as the entire legal community is concerned. What is your take on that? The argument that the Bar Council seems to be putting forth is that the Supreme Court has no business here. The legislature and the will of the public should decide the fate of the issue.
So it's very surprising that the Bar Council is taking such a stance. The petitioners before the Supreme Court are advancing their arguments on the basis of their fundamental rights. And when it comes to these rights, it does not matter that the percentages are not in their favor or are in their favor or not. Let's for a moment assume that yes, 99.9% are against this, and we don't have any basis for that at all. Even if it's only 0.1% of people who are seeking to assert their rights, they are very well entitled to assert those rights. And I don't see why the Supreme Court should shy away from even hearing this case, only because presumably or there might be some sort of opposition to it by the popular will. Apart from that, the Bar Council, as a regulatory body for lawyers and as a body which is elected by lawyers, should, I would assume, have a tilt in favor of a greater role for lawyers and therefore for the court in the public domain on questions like this, on questions of rights like this. When that's the situation, it's a little perplexing that they want to cede the space to the legislation, to the legislature, and they want the court to stay away from these questions. So it's not only outside their ambit, it's also counterproductive to the rights of the lawyers, which they are supposed to look out for.
Sure. Sure. So that, of course, is the legal aspect. But Mr. Agnikar, let me come to you. Borrowing from some of these arguments that were made, the government the submission that they've made before the top court is that this is an urban elitist concept. That phrase has invited a lot of commentary, both in and outside of the courtroom. The Bar Council seems to reflect that motion by arguing that this is, quote-unquote, a social experiment. The demand for same-sex marriages, the Bar Council calls it a, quote-unquote, social experiment engineered by a select few. That is something that even invited comments from the Chief Justice himself, Mr. Agnikar.
See, I think the Bar Council may not have read all the petitions, and I wouldn't be surprised because this was a statement made also by the people representing the government earlier on. Firstly, there are two petitions. One was from Akai Padmashila, who was thrown out of her home at the age of 15. Whatever she has become as a person in the mainstream has been her own doing, her own will, her own strength. She's definitely not an urban elite person. Similarly, there is Zainab Patel, who's a trans woman. She also was begging on the streets at one point in time in her life to come to a point where she educated herself and got a good job in a KPMG and now works for another multinational company. She definitely was not and is not an urban elite. Similarly, if you go to another petition which hasn't been spoken about very much, which is led by Rituparna Bora, who is an indigenous tribe person from Assam, okay, and that's another petition sitting out there in the courts, which is talking about familial violence, which is talking about chosen family, and looking at marriage from different aspects. In that petition, there are many other signatories from small town India. Go back a little bit more into what has been reported in India when Duti Chand came out. She's from small town India too. And when she came out, she talked about her partner and she talked about having the right to marry her partner. Now, people can make all kinds of, statements about the petitioners and about anyone without really doing enough homework. And it's really sad that when lawyers and when a council like this fails to do basic homework before they speak, they actually diminishing the significance of their own office and of their own position of where they stand as part of a democratic setup. So it's really sad that they're doing themselves more of a disservice than anything else. And I just want to add one or two more things that when they're talking about the legislature, I think let's look at the record of the legislature. In 2022, I think it was the NCP leader who moved a private member bill on expanding the idea of family to include, same-sex couples and marriage equality. That is just sitting in the deep freeze. Even earlier on, and the previous government was there, when Dr. Shashi Tharoor had moved to the courts on reading down 377 twice over as private member bills, they weren't even addressed or even entertained by his own party. So what are we really talking about of a legislature actually looking at rights of people and fundamental rights, which is why we're at the courts. As Mr. Hegde said, that is the space for us. We have no option,
Sure. Mr. Hegde, let me come to you now. When we look at the road ahead in terms of the way this battle could turn, the argument that the Bar Council is making is that any decision by the Supreme Court in favor of the petitioners will be treated as being against the Indian culture. I'm talking about the acceptance. Even if the Supreme Court were to go ahead and to recognize the concept of same-sex marriages, will it be accepted? We saw what happened with the Sabrimala verdict and then the reaction on the ground. We saw what happened in cases such as the Jallikattu issue, and then we saw the reaction on the ground. Even if the Supreme Court goes ahead and plants this seed, will it begin to take root given the popular culture and given sentiments like the ones that have been shared by the Bar Council?
So without commenting on which way the decision is likely to go, I would say that so far, the way the hearings have gone on, it would appear that the Supreme Court is taking a very careful route. They have sort of taken the stance right now that they will only be looking at whether same-sex marriages can be brought in within the Special Marriages Act. And they would not at the moment be going into the question of whether this can be read into personal law. So if it's a question of culture, the court is not going into the question of does Hindu law permit this? Does Muslim law permit this? Or do any of the traditional systems permit this? They are looking simply into the question of does the Special Marriages Act permit this? So now this is a legislation that's already looking at something that already permits something that is untraditional, perhaps an interreligious wedding, perhaps a wedding that for whatever reason the parties don't want to do it in their traditional system. So even if it is allowed, it does not in any way impinge upon the cultural system that exists, the traditional system that exists. Now, this is a legal recognition that will be given, and I don't see how it will affect any personal laws or some religious issues.
Sure. We're running out of time, Mr. Ragnikar. I'll come to you for the final 30 seconds. There has been silence from the political quarters, especially some of the opposition leaders. There has been silence from them on this particular issue. Is that something that perhaps can take this conversation forward? Is that a catalyst? And is it disappointing that so far we haven't seen so much political conversations on this very emotive issue?
Ashmit, I think we as a community have learned to live with very limited political support. We've seen also celebrities and all kinds of people, turning up on the day after all the activists and the lawyers fought for 377. No one was really there when the battle was being fought, not just in the court, but in homes, on the streets, in various other places. So it is disappointing. Obviously, you do want people who say a few things about us, who include us in their manifestos, to come forth and speak, come forth, maybe even move courts, through public interest litigations or whatever other forms that they could do, come onto political debates and talk for us. But the fact of the matter is, I think our political system is so sucked into the whole vote bank sort of politics that they fail to do the right thing and they prefer to do what is safe. And so we have to fight on our own. We have to fight on our own. So it is disappointing. But honestly speaking, I think there are very few political parties that we can rely on or depend on. And that's the state of our democracy, and which is why we are being saved, hopefully, by the courts. Thankfully, we have courts. Thankfully, we have a democratic system of the kind of courts that we have. And whatever we've heard in the few days in the Supreme Court from the Chief Justice, from other members of the bench, it does give you heart.
Sure. Right, Mr. Ragnikar. So all eyes clearly on the Supreme Court. But speaking of the court, it couldn't take up the matter today. 2 of the 5 judges appear to be indisposed on account of infection with COVID. One prays for their best health and hopes that the hearing resumes in the apex court. But that's all the time that we have for. With that, it's time now to slip into a very short break. On the other side, my colleague Parikshit Luthra speaks to Arjun Nair, co-founder of Great Learning, about how Indian professionals stack up against their global peers. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. You're watching Newscenter. I'm Parikshit Luthra. With growing uncertainty around jobs and careers, Indian professionals seem to be turning to upskilling to safeguard their prospects. Findings from Great Learning's report indicates that 83% of Indian professionals are intending to upskill in 2023, as against a global average of 74%. The primary motivation for upskilling globally has been to advance their careers within the current organization. The report also highlights the top domains for upskilling are management, digital marketing and data science. To discuss this further, joining me now is Arjun Nair, co-founder of Great Learning. Arjun, thank you very much for joining us here. Give us a sense of how AI and automation are having an impact on job creation. Your report also points out about the number of jobs where people could actually be displaced. Could you give us an outlook on that? What are the kind of roles that will become redundant in 2023 because of increasing use of AI and automation, and how many people do you expect to be displaced as a result?
Yeah, thanks, Parikshit. It's wonderful to be here. Good evening. It is actually very interesting what's happening around the world right now, and you brought up AI. In the last few months, particularly after ChatGPT has been released and now with GPT-4, it's very, very fascinating, the pace of development of these technologies. Now, when it comes to jobs, of course, across the board, there are different jobs that are getting displaced. Now, most jobs are actually going to be impacted. Now, I don't necessarily think that all jobs are going to be displaced. Several of them will be about using these technologies to further enhance and improve your productivity, and of course, take part in a global workforce. So with ChatGPT, for example, now you can use ChatGPT and AI for a variety of roles, whether it's about content production, whether it's about writing articles. In fact, even for software engineering and for coding, we'll be using AI. So across the board, there are several industries which are being disrupted, and that will continue to go in the next few years. And this is not just a phenomenon that's in a specific market. It's happening in developed countries like the US, and it's very much going to happen in countries like India. And India particularly is going to be actually in a very good place for people who are looking to build a skill set, whether it's in AI and data science and so on. Because increasingly, one, of course, automation is taking place. But secondly, there's also this macroeconomic condition where companies are actually struggling. And as you're seeing, there are tech layoffs happening and jobs uncertainty is happening. So many companies are actually trying to see how they can reduce costs. So if an Indian workforce builds these skill set, they're actually going to be in a place to benefit positively from this technology disruption and change.
Right. I would also like to ask you, what are the skill sets which are most sought after right now? You've also pointed out about the large number of people in the workforce in India and around the world who are looking to upskill. So if we were to ask you about the India market specifically, what would be the percentage of people that you surveyed who want to upskill themselves? What are the kind of skills or what are the domains they want to skill themselves in?
Yeah, so we did the survey by surveying about 3,000 people globally. Now, even beyond that survey of 3,000, we're actually actively involved with millions of learners that we engage on a monthly basis. So we have inputs coming from not just in India, from globally. Now, you asked specifically about India. In India, we find that about 83% of the professionals are actually looking to upskill. Now, compared to a global average, which is about 74% in the survey, we find that more Indians are looking forward to upskill and build a skill set. As we spoke about, these are in areas like digital marketing, data science, management, and of course, we see more adoption to these technologies around AI, and of course, software engineering, coding, and so on. So basically, technology and data-related jobs, and that's what one would imagine, where most of this disruption is happening and where most of the lucrative careers and most of the lucrative jobs are actually going to come in the next few months and years.
Right. I would also like to ask you, how many people actually believe that upskilling is important to future-proof one's career? How many of them want to do this on their own, sponsor themselves, and how many companies are actually doing this for employees?
So most people, as we spoke about earlier, most people are actually now saying that they want to upskill. Now, this percentage has kept on increasing. Now, the motivation for upskilling has changed. So that's one of the interesting things that has come out from this survey. So last year, if you look at the motivation for upskilling, that was primarily around job switching and so on. Whereas this year, the motivation for upskilling is growing in their career. So people are looking at upskilling as a mechanism for job security and distinguishing their profile and making sure that their job, they can hold on to it. So that's one of the changes that we are seeing. Now, when it comes to companies, now we see a variety of companies operating in different modes. In some cases, the companies are actually coming to us and saying that, hey, we've got this large workforce of people that we need to upskill and then get them to have the necessary skill set. And we actively engage with companies where we work with their workforce to transform their digital skill set along all the areas that we spoke about earlier: data science, AI, cloud computing, cybersecurity, and so on. In other cases, what we're seeing is that the learners themselves are going to their organizations and saying that, hey, can you sponsor me if I build a skill set? And several companies are now creating these tuition reimbursements, and that's happening in India. We work with companies where candidates come to us and say that my company is sponsored and I'd like to learn the specific skill set. So that's actually a significant trend that's happening as well. And which is also interesting, even with this macroeconomic conditions, several companies are still sponsoring candidates to acquire that skill set, because I think companies realize now that with those skill sets in digital areas, it's not just a cost, right? It's not just an expense. It's also an opportunity for the companies to build a workforce and compete globally. So it's happening where the importance of upskilling, specifically in these areas in data science, AI, cloud computing, cybersecurity, digital marketing, all of these areas are getting more relevance and more adoption for people in India and globally.
All right, we've run out of time, but thank you very much, Arjun, for joining us, giving us some of the key highlights of your report. Very interesting to hear the importance of upskilling among professionals in India and across the world as well. Thanks once again for being with us, Arjun. Moving on, food regulator FSSAI has set up a dedicated advertisement monitoring committee to scrutinize claims made by food business operators. The regulator has said that unsatisfactory responses to compliance requirements could attract penalties if claims are not withdrawn. The penalties could include fines up to 10 lakh rupees and cancellation of license in case of repeated offences. Abhimanyu Sharma is standing by with the details.
Reacting to social media reports on health claims made by several food business operators, FSSAI has reiterated that any health claims being made by FBOs need to be in compliance with law. They need to be scientifically verified, peer-reviewed, and compliance is to be submitted to the government. Any non-compliance with the existing rules and regulations may attract penalty up to rupees 10 lakhs, and repeated non-compliance may also lead to suspension or revocation of respective licenses. An advertisement monitoring committee has also been dedicated to scrutinize claims made by FBOs on social media and e-commerce platforms in the past 6 months. As many as 138 cases have been reported by the committee of misleading claims and non-compliance by prominent brands. Now, this reiteration by FSSAI comes close to the heels of several social media reports in which several social media influencers were served a legal notice by an FBO after they had claimed that several health claims which were being advertised by the said FBO were misleading and they were directed at kids. The influencers in that stated incident had claimed that the products were harmful for kids but were still being marketed wrongly to the same set of children.
Thanks, Abhimanyu, for joining us. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Newscenter. News continues on CNBC-TV18. Stay tuned.